Hi, boys and girls. You have been hearing books about houses, and some have been fiction books and some non-fiction books. Today's book is called The Little House. I think this is a great book to end our house unit on, especially because it got a Caldecott medal, which means that it's a very famous and very good book. This book is called The Little House, and it's written by Virginia Lee Burton. Look at the sun. What do you notice about it? How does this sun give you a clue that this story will be fiction? Maybe because the sun has a face. Does the sun really have a face in real life? No. In this story, the little house will seem like a person. Some of the things that it says and does makes it seem like a person. To me, it looks like the house has eyes, a nose, and a mouth. So, this is definitely a fiction book. But I think that this is a great book that is going to teach us a very important message. I want you to think about the message that it might be teaching us, and then I will tell you what the message is that the author was trying to teach us about. Let's look at this inside cover right here. Do you see this? What do you notice is happening to the house in this illustration? Do you notice anything? Look, it changes. And then look at the transportation. This starts with a horse and carriage, a bigger horse and carriage. Ooh, this looks like kind of like a wagon, a car, like an old-time car. And then it goes to a train, and now a truck, and another truck. So, what could we say about this? Do you think that the time is changing? Let's read to find out. The little house was very happy as she sat on the hill and watched the countryside around her. She watched the sun rise in the morning, and she watched the sun set in the evening. Day followed day, each one a little different from the one before. But the little house stayed the same. I really want you to pay attention to what's going on around the house as we read the story. In the nights, she watched the moon grow from a thin new moon to a full moon, then back again to a thin old moon. And when there was no moon, and she watched the stars, way off in the distance, she could see the lights of the city. The little house was curious about the city. The little house wondered what it would be like to live there. Time passed quickly for the little house as she watched the countryside slowly change with the seasons. In the spring, when the days grew longer, the sun warmer, she waited for the first robin to return from the south. She watched the grass turn green. She watched the buds on the trees swell, and the apple trees burst into blossom. She watched the children playing in the brook. In the long summer days, she sat in the sun and watched the trees cover themselves with leaves and the white daisies cover the hill. She watched the gardens grow. She watched the apples turn red and ripen. She watched the children swimming in the pool. I want you to pay close attention to how everything is changing around the house. Now look at the house. The house has a face here, and they're talking about she. They're saying she did this and she did that. So we know this, it definitely is a fiction book. But look at the house's smile. Is she happy here? I think she is. In the fall, when the days grew shorter and the nights colder, she watched the first frost turn the leaves to bright yellow and orange and red. She watched the harvest gather and the apples picked. She watched the children go back to school. In the winter, when the nights were long and the days were short, and the countryside covered with snow, she watched the children coasting and skating year followed year. The apple trees grew old and new ones were planted. The children grew up and went away to the city. And now at night, the lights of the city seemed brighter and closer. The lights of the city seemed brighter and closer, but the house hasn't moved. I wonder what's going on around the house. One day, the little house was surprised to see a horseless carriage coming down the winding country road. Pretty soon, there were more of them on the road and fewer carriages pulled by horses. Pretty soon along came some surveyors and surveyed a line in front of the little house. Pretty soon along came a steam shovel and dug a road through the hill covered with daisies. Then some trucks came and dumped big stones on the road. Then some trucks with little stones, and then some trucks with tar and sand, and finally a steamroller came and rolled it all smooth, and the road was done. Oh my goodness, look at all that's going around the little house. This land was so beautiful before this all happened. What do you think the little house is thinking? What do you think she's thinking? Is her smile as big anymore? Now, the little house watched the trucks and automobiles going back and forth into the city. Gasoline stations, roadside stands, and small houses followed the new road. Everyone and everything moved faster, much faster now than before. More roads were made, and the countryside was divided into lots more houses and bigger houses, apartment houses and tenement houses, schools, stores, garages spread over the land and crowded around the little house. No one wanted to live in her and take care of her anymore. She couldn't be sold for gold or silver, so she just stayed there and watched. Oh, poor little house. How do you think she feels right now? Now, it was not so quiet and peaceful at night. Now the lights of the city were bright and very close, and the street lights shone all night. This must be living in the city, thought the little house, and didn't know whether she liked it or not. She missed the field of daisies and the apple trees dancing in the moonlight. Pretty soon, there were trolley cars going back and forth in front of the little house. They went back and forth all day and part of the night. Everyone seemed to be very busy, and everyone seemed to be in a hurry. Pretty soon, there was an elevated train going back and forth above the little house. The air was filled with dust and smoke, and this noise was so loud that it shook the little house. Now she couldn't tell when spring came or summer or fall or winter. It all seemed about the same. Oh, look, you can barely see her now. You can tell, though, that she's so unhappy, huh? Pretty soon, there was a subway going back and forth underneath the little house. She couldn't see it, but she could feel and hear it. People were moving faster and faster. No one noticed the little house anymore. They hurried by without a glance. Pretty soon, they tore down the apartment houses and tenant houses around the little house and started digging big cellars, one on each side. The steam shovels dug down 3 stories on one side and 4 stories on the other side. Pretty soon, they started building up. They built up 25 stories on one side and 35 stories on the other. They're making a bigger city. Looks like these are going to be skyscrapers. This house, she almost looks shocked that this is happening. If it were a face. You kind of see that? Now the little house only saw the sun at noon and didn't see the moon or stars at night at all, because the lights of the city were too bright. She didn't like living in the city. At night, she used to dream of the country and the field of daisies and apple trees dancing in the moonlight. The little house was very sad and lonely. Her paint was cracked and dirty. Her windows were broken and her shutters hung crookedly. She looked shabby, though she was just as good of a house as ever underneath. Look, now there's it looks like boards are over the door. Oh, so sad. Then one fine morning in spring, along came the great-great-granddaughter of the man who built the little house so well. She saw the shabby little house, but she didn't hurry by. There was something about the little house that made her stop and look again. She said to her husband, "That little house looks just like the little house my grandmother lived in when she was a little girl. Only that little house was way out in the country, on a hill covered with daisies and apple trees going around." So she thinks it might be the house that her grandmother lived in, but she's not sure because it's not in the area that it was in a long, long time ago. They found out it was the very same house, so they went to the movers to see if the little house could be moved. The movers looked at the little house all over and said, Sure, this house is good as ever. She's built so well we could move her anywhere. So they jacked up the little house and put her on wheels. Traffic was held up for hours as they slowly moved her out of the city. Now, what do you think is going through what do you think the little house is feeling right now? Think she's happy, nervous? Is she still sad? What do you think? At first, the little house was frightened, but after she got used to it, she'd rather liked it. They rolled along the big road, and they rolled along with little roads until they were way out in the country. When the little house saw the green grass, they went along and along, but they couldn't seem to find just the right place. They tried the little house here, and then they tried it there. Finally, they saw a little hill in the middle of a field and apple trees growing around. There, said the great-great-granddaughter, that's just the place. Yes, it is, said the little house to herself. A cellar was dug on top of the hill, and slowly they moved the house from the road to the hill. The windows and shutters were fixed, and once again they painted her a lovely shade of pink. As the little house settled on her new foundation, she smiled happily. Once again she could watch the sun and the moon and the stars. Once again she could watch spring and summer and fall and winter come and go. Once again, she was lived in and taken care of. Look at her happy. She's happy now, huh? And then here's the family. See, she's being taken care of by the family that brought her there. Never again would she be curious about the city. Never again would she want to live there. The stars twinkled above her. A new moon was coming up. It was spring, and all was quiet and peaceful in the country. The end. Oh, I just loved that book, and I hope you loved it too. So, can you think about the message that this author was trying to tell us? Everything changes, and some changes are good and some changes are not so good, but it's what is on the inside that matters more than what is on the outside. And everything works out in the end, huh? Did everything work out for this little house in the end? It did, because she made sure that it was what was on the inside that counted. Boys and girls, I loved reading this book to you and reading all the other books in our house unit. So after we read that, can you really talk about what makes a house a home and how we can keep houses and maintain them and make sure they're a home, even if it's not a roof over our heads or the place where we like to sleep and go to. A house is a home when we feel loved. A home is a place where we feel loved, so it can be anywhere. And that's what's so special about having a home. I hope that's what you feel like when you are home. All right, boys and girls, we will start our next unit in a couple of weeks.